The glass tower of Skyline Data Group rose over New York like a giant mirror, catching the last light of the day. Inside, on the top floor, everything was falling apart. Brandon Cole sat alone in the boardroom, his dark blue suit rumpled, his tie hanging loose around his neck. His eyes were locked on the stack of papers in front of him. They were thick, full of small print and cold words: liquidation, seizure, asset recovery. If he signed them, it meant one thing: his company, his fortune, his reputation, everything he had built would be gone. His lawyer sat at the far end of the long glass table, waiting in tense silence. Two bankers stood by the window, whispering into their phones. A government official checked his watch again and again, like he could not wait to leave. They were all here to watch the billionaire lose everything. Brandon's hand shook as he picked up the pen. His throat felt tight. Just sign it, he told himself. End this. Stop the calls, the news, the shame. For the first time in his life, the man who never bowed to anyone felt small. The lights above him buzzed softly. The city moved on behind the windows. No one out there knew the king of data was about to fall. He brought the pen closer to the paper. His heart banged against his ribs. The room felt like it was closing in on him. And then a soft voice came from the doorway. "Sir, please don't sign that yet." Everyone in the room turned. Standing at the edge of the glass door was a woman in a simple gray cleaning uniform. Her name tag was crooked, her hands still in yellow gloves holding a small blue mop bucket. Her black hair was pulled into a low bun, a few strands falling around her tired but kind face. Her name was Linda Brooks, the night cleaner. Most people in the company barely noticed her, but in that moment every eye in the room was on her. The banker frowned. "Ma'am, this is a private meeting, you need to leave." But Linda did not move. Her eyes stayed on Brandon, red, gentle, and full of something no one else in the room had: real concern. "You're about to throw away more than just money," she said quietly. "Please, at least hear what I have to say first." Brandon froze, the pen hovering over the paper. Everyone stared at her, shocked that a cleaning lady would dare speak up in a room full of powerful men in suits. His lawyer whispered sharply, "Mr. Cole, we don't have time for this, you need to sign now." But Brandon's eyes stayed on Linda. For reasons he could not explain, something inside him refused to move. This woman, who usually passed by like a shadow, had just stepped into the center of his storm. And in the next few seconds, the words coming out of her mouth would change his life. Hi friends, welcome to today's story. Before we go deeper, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss more powerful stories that can touch your heart and change the way you see life. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in New York, Lagos, London, Houston, South Africa, Jamaica, or somewhere else in the world? We love to read your comments. Now, let's go back to how everything started for the billionaire who thought he could never lose. Years before the red papers and the cold stares, people knew only one thing about Brandon Cole: he always won. He did not come from money. He was not born in a big house with a driver and a private school. Brandon grew up in a small, noisy apartment over a corner store in a rough part of town. His dad, Michael, was a mechanic with oil on his hands and a gentle voice. His mom, Diane, worked at a diner refilling coffee cups with a tired smile. They did not have much, but they had enough to keep the lights on most days. Brandon remembered nights when the power was cut and he had to do homework by the light of a small candle. He remembered his mom pretending she was not hungry so he could take the last piece of chicken. He remembered the shame on his dad's face when the landlord banged on the door, asking for rent they did not have. As a boy, Brandon would stare out of the broken window at the city lights far away and whisper to himself, "One day, I'll own one of those buildings. I'll make so much money that nobody will ever talk down to us again." That promise grew inside him like fire. He was the kid who stayed back after class to use the school computer, teaching himself how to code from free websites. He fixed old phones for neighbors, built small programs for local shops, and read every book on business he could find at the library. While other kids were going to parties, Brandon was designing apps and dreaming about servers, systems, and stock charts. When he finally launched Skyline Data Group from a tiny shared office with flickering lights and second-hand chairs, nobody took him seriously. He was just another young man with a loud dream and no safety net. But he had something more powerful than money: hunger and discipline. He slept under his desk some nights. He answered client calls at 3 a.m. He coded until his eyes burned. Slowly, small businesses started trusting him with their data, then medium ones, then banks, hospitals, retail giants. He promised them something simple: your information will be safe with us, safer than anywhere else. And for many years he kept that promise. He moved from the tiny office to a bigger one, then to an entire floor, then to the shining tower that now carried his company logo high above the streets. He bought a penthouse, a private jet, fancy suits that cost more than his dad's old car. He spoke on stages. He was on magazine covers with headlines like, "The man who made data feel unbreakable." But the higher he climbed, the more something inside him changed. At first, Brandon remembered where he came from. He sent his parents money. He paid off their debts. He gave his mom a small bakery, her old dream. He bought his dad a clean, bright shop with new tools. He hired people from his old neighborhood. He told his employees stories about never forgetting your roots. Then the praise started, the awards, the interviews, the way people's voices shifted when they said his name. "Mr. Cole, sir, boss." He got used to being the most important person in the room. He started moving faster, talking faster, demanding more. If a worker was 5 minutes late, he noticed. If a report had one small mistake, he raised his voice. If someone did not answer his email at midnight, he called them lazy. He did not see people as people anymore. He saw numbers, results, and deadlines. Feelings don't build empires, he liked to say. Results do. And somewhere along the way, Brandon stopped looking at the faces of the people who cleaned his office at night. That was where Linda came in. Linda Brooks was 54 years old, with kind eyes and hands that had washed, scrubbed, wiped, and swept for more years than she could count. She had raised 2 children, helped raise a grandson, and buried a husband who died too early from a heart problem that they could not afford to treat fast enough. She did not grow up dreaming of cleaning skyscrapers, but life had its own path. Every evening, just as most of the workers at Skyline Data Group were going home, Linda was coming in. She wore comfortable black sneakers, a simple gray uniform with a small building services patch on the chest, and carried a lunch box with leftover rice or pasta wrapped in foil. She cleaned many floors, but the top floor, the executive level, was her hardest. It felt like another world. The carpet was soft and thick. The art on the walls cost more than her entire yearly salary. The offices smelled like expensive cologne and fresh coffee. The glass shone so bright that sometimes she could see her own tired face looking back at her, older than she felt inside. She had a small schedule: wipe the desks, empty the trash, clean the windows, vacuum the floor, polish the glass railing, make sure the boardroom sparkled for the next day's big meetings. Most nights the floor was empty and quiet. She liked it that way. It gave her time to think, to pray in her heart, and to breathe after her long bus rides. Sometimes Brandon stayed late. His office lights were often still on when she came up with her cart. She never entered until he left. She did not want to be a bother. She knew rich people liked their space. But she saw things. She saw him packing, phone to his ear, voice sharp and angry. She saw him hunching over his laptop with his head in his hands. She saw empty coffee cups, energy drink cans, and plates from dinners he did not finish. She saw the way he stared out the window sometimes, like he was chasing something even the city could not give. Linda had cleaned enough offices to know one thing: rich did not always mean happy. One night, about 3 months before everything fell apart, Linda came into the boardroom to find a glass of water spilled all over the table. A stack of papers lay half-soaked, abandoned. A chair was pushed back like someone had stood up too quickly and left. She sighed, set down her bucket, and went to work. As she wiped the water, her eyes caught the corner of one of the papers. The words were big enough to read. "Risk report urgent." There were red marks and warning signs printed all over it. She did not understand the details, but she understood one thing: whoever wrote this was scared. Someone had tried to warn them. She gently stacked the papers, set them on the dry part of the table, and whispered to herself, "I hope they listen." She did not know that Brandon had already seen that report and ignored it. 2 weeks before the collapse, the signs were everywhere, if you knew where to look. A young man from the IT team, a skinny guy named Dylan with round glasses, had knocked on Brandon's office door with shaking hands. "Sir, we really need to update our security system," Dylan had said. "Some of our firewalls are old, and with how big we are now, we're more of a target. I've seen strange activity in the logs. We need to slow down the merger and fix this before we move all the new data in." Brandon barely looked up from his screen. He had 3 calls waiting, an investor meeting in 10 minutes, and a public interview in 1 hour. "Send your concerns to Ethan," Brandon said, referring to his chief financial officer, Ethan Price. "If it was truly urgent, he would have told me already." "Sir, I did send it to him," Dylan said, voice small. "He said the updates will cost too much and slow us down." Brandon's jaw tightened. He hated that word, slow. "Do you know how much we lose every day if that merger is delayed?" Brandon asked, finally lifting his eyes. "Millions, we've talked about this. Growth first, will strengthen everything after the deal is done." "But sir..." "That's enough, Dylan. I hired you to solve problems, not bring me fear. Do your job. We're not kids playing in a lab. This is real business." Dylan left, shoulders heavy. Brandon leaned back in his chair. He did feel a small squeeze of worry in his chest, but he pushed it down. The deal was too big. They were about to join with a global company that would push Skyline into every continent. His name would be everywhere. He could practically see the headlines already. Skyline Data takes over the world. The risk report, the IT warning, the quiet looks between his tech team members during meetings. He brushed them all away like crumbs off his suit. He trusted his own mind more than anyone else's. It had never failed him before. Downstairs on the service level, Linda stood in front of her open locker, counting the small bills in her wallet. Rent, groceries, bus fare, her grandson's school books, her daughter's medical pills. She put the bills back and closed her eyes for a minute. "Lord, just give me strength for today," she whispered. "Give me the health to work, and please watch over my family." Her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter, Kim. "Mom, the doctor says I need more tests next month. I'm scared. Are you coming on Saturday?" Linda's heart pinched. She typed back, "Yes, baby, I'll be there. Don't be afraid. We'll get through this, one step at a time." She slid the phone into her pocket, grabbed her cleaning cart, and headed to the elevator. On the ride up, she thought about her life. Some people might say it was small. She did not own a company. She did not have a big car or a fancy home, but she loved the people in her world deeply. She believed that even if you could not change the whole universe, you could make your corner of it kinder. And even on the nights she felt invisible, she believed God could still use her. Even if it was just to encourage one tired soul or clean one office so well that someone could breathe better the next day. She had no idea that soon, the tired soul she would encourage would be the billionaire at the very top. The night everything broke started like any other. The sky outside Skyline Tower was dark, sprinkled with city lights. Taxi horns blared down below. The air inside the building was cool and still. Most workers had gone home. The big screen in the lobby flashed numbers and graphs glowing in blues and greens. Linda arrived at her usual time, swiping her badge, nodding at the security guard. "Good evening, Tom," she said with a small smile. "Hey, Ms. Brooks," he replied, "long night." She laughed softly. "They're all long nights." She took the elevator up, the walls reflecting her tired eyes. As the doors opened on the top floor, she felt something she did not feel on most nights: tension. Light still shone from Brandon's office. The boardroom door was open, lights on, papers were scattered across the table like a storm had passed through. She could hear voices, loud, sharp, and afraid. "You have to shut the servers down now," someone yelled from inside Brandon's office. "We can't," another voice replied, "if we shut them down. We'll lose everything, but if we keep them up, we're already losing everything." Linda paused by her cart, listening. She did not understand the technical words, but she understood panic. She did her best to stay out of the way and started with the other offices, wiping down desks and emptying trash cans. But every few minutes, someone would rush past her, people she had seen before, now with sweat on their faces and phones pressed to their ears. Words floated through the air like broken pieces of glass. "Breach. Lost access. Client accounts wiped. Millions gone. We're trending for the wrong reason." Every time the elevator doors opened, more bad news seemed to step out. Someone from legal, someone from public relations, someone from the government. She could feel fear growing on that floor like smoke. Finally, as she was wiping the glass wall near Brandon's office, she saw him. He stood in the middle of his office, surrounded by screens. Every single one of them was filled with red warnings, error messages, and fast-moving numbers. His face, usually calm and firm, was pale. His hair, always perfectly styled, was slightly out of place. There was a small, scared boy hiding behind the powerful man. He grabbed his phone. "Call the backup team again," he shouted. "Tell them to get those servers back online. I don't care what it costs." A man at his door shook his head. "They tried, sir. The attackers are already inside our main systems. They're deleting as they go. Our clients are watching their accounts drop to zero in real time. Some of them have already called the news." "What about the merger?" Brandon demanded. "The other company has paused everything. They don't want to link their name to this. They said they'll review their options." Brandon's stomach dropped. Review their options was rich people language for "we're leaving you." He slammed his fist on his desk so hard that a glass paperweight rolled and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Linda flinched at the sound. For a second, his eyes met hers through the glass wall. It was the first time he had really looked at her in months. His chest rose and fell quickly. He looked like a man who had been punched in the soul. She gave him a small, gentle nod, the kind of nod that said, "I see you, even if nobody else does." He looked away, already pulled back into the chaos. The hours that followed were a blur for him. Calls from angry clients, calls from scared investors, news channels wanting a statement, government agencies asking for answers, lawyers warning him about legal exposure and criminal negligence. His ears buzzed with too many voices. Some told him to fight, some told him to run, some told him to let the company die and protect what was left of his personal wealth. At one point, he stepped into the bathroom, gripped the edge of the sink, and stared at his reflection. "This can't be real," he whispered. "I'm Brandon Cole, I don't lose." But the numbers did not care about his name. The system did not care about his ego. The attack was still moving, cold and silent, ripping through what he had spent years building. He thought of his parents. His mom, probably asleep with the TV on. His dad, who still wore his old Skyline Data cap with pride. He thought of the promises he had made. They would never worry again. They would never feel small again. "What have I done?" he breathed. When he walked back out, Linda was there, quietly wiping down the edge of a table. She stepped back to give him space, but her eyes followed him. He stopped for a second, his feet surprising him. "You picked a bad night to clean," he said, his voice dry and broken. She gave a small, soft smile. "I clean on good nights and bad nights, sir," she replied. "That's life." He almost said something else, but his phone rang again. He turned away. The moment passed. By dawn, the damage was clear. Skyline Data Group was all over the news. Clients were screaming on live TV about losing everything. Experts were talking about the biggest data disaster of the decade. Stock prices were falling like stones dropped from a roof. In the boardroom, a pile of papers sat waiting. The people in suits were ready to move. There were plans for selling off parts of the company, plans for freezing his accounts, plans for protecting the system from the mess that had once been Brandon's empire. He felt like a stranger sitting at his own table. His lawyer spoke in a calm, flat tone. "Brandon, this is the cleanest way. You sign, we start damage control. You'll lose the company, most of your fortune, but you might stay out of jail. If you don't sign, they'll say you refuse to cooperate. They'll come after you harder." The government official adjusted his glasses. "We understand this is difficult, Mr. Cole, but people have lost money, they're angry, someone has to be responsible." The banker added, "If you sign now, we can at least support a small personal repayment plan. You won't be rich anymore, but you won't be on the street either." The words "you won't be rich anymore" hit him like a slap. Who was he if he wasn't rich, if he was the man who never lost? He looked down at his hands. They were the same hands that had once typed code in a tiny office, the same hands that had signed his first big contract, the same hands that had handed his parents the keys to their new house. Now those hands were shaking over papers that would erase everything. His chest hurt, his head pounded. He thought of all the people who would cheer to see him fall and all the people who would suffer because he had not listened earlier. "Maybe I deserve this," he thought. He picked up the pen. Just then, the boardroom door opened a crack. No one paid attention at first. They were too focused on the pen in his hand. But Linda saw she had been in the hallway deciding whether she should go home and rest or stay a little longer and check on the mess upstairs. Something in her heart had pulled her back to the top floor. She saw Brandon through the glass. His shoulders were slumped. His face looked older than it had the night before. She saw the papers. She did not know every detail, but she knew what it meant when a man looked like he was signing his own life away. Her feet started moving before her mind fully caught up. She walked into the boardroom, her shoes almost silent on the thick carpet. Now standing there with her yellow gloves and her small blue bucket, she let her voice come out, soft but steady. "Sir, please don't sign that yet." The room froze. The lawyer looked offended. "Excuse me, who let you in here?" The official frowned. "Ma'am, this is not the time." The banker muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." But Linda did not back away. Her heart thumped fast, but she did not show it. She had raised children. She had faced landlords with unpaid bills. She had sat in hospital rooms watching machines beep. Fear was not new to her. Brandon looked up slowly. His eyes tired and confused. Of all the people to interrupt him, he had never expected it to be her. "What are you doing here, Ms.?" he asked, his voice rough. "Brooks," she said. "Linda Brooks, I clean this floor." "I don't think you understand what's happening," the lawyer said sharply. "We are in the middle of a legal process." Linda glanced at him, then back at Brandon. "I may not understand your big words," she said calmly, "but I understand this." She nodded toward the papers. "That paper is about to steal more than your bank accounts. It's about to steal your purpose." Brandon's fingers tightened around the pen. "What purpose?" he asked quietly. "My purpose was this company. It's gone. I failed. People lost money. There's nothing left." "There is always something left," Linda replied softly. "As long as you're breathing, God is not finished with you. Money can go, houses can go, names on buildings can come down, but that does not mean your life is over." The banker rolled his eyes. "Mr. Cole, with all respect, we don't have time for this." But Brandon's eyes stayed locked on hers. There was something in her voice he had not heard from anyone all night. No cold calculation, no hidden interest, no fear of losing a bonus. Just truth. "You don't know me," he said, trying to sound strong, but his voice cracked. "You don't know what I've done. I pushed people too hard. I ignored warnings. Maybe this is what I deserve." Linda took one small step closer. "I don't need to know every detail," she said. "I just know what I see, a man who built something from nothing, a man who forgot along the way why he started, and a man who is about to let shame write the last line of his story." Her eyes shined with unshed tears. "You think losing your money is the worst thing that can happen to you. It's not. The worst thing is losing your heart, letting this moment tell you that you are only as valuable as your bank account." The room had gone silent. Even the lawyer did not speak. Brandon swallowed, his throat hurt. "What do you think I should do?" he whispered. "Walk out of here and pretend nothing happened?" "No," Linda said. "Face what you did, take responsibility, help the people who got hurt, but don't sign out of your own story. Don't let these papers tell you who you are forever. You can rebuild. Maybe not the way you dreamt, not with the same power, not with the same pride, but maybe with more honesty, more kindness, more wisdom." She pointed gently, not at his suit, not at his watch, but at his chest. "Somewhere in there is the boy who promised his parents he would change their life. Somewhere in there is the man who worked through the night for something bigger than himself. You lost your way, it happens, but losing your way is not the same as being lost forever." His eyes burned. He blinked quickly, not wanting to cry in front of all these people. The lawyer finally found his voice. "Mr. Cole, this is emotional, but it does not change the facts. If you don't sign, you will face serious consequences." Linda turned her head slightly. "And if he does sign without thinking clearly, he will live the rest of his life believing he had no choice," she said. "But he does, he always does." She took a small breath. "Just don't sign in panic, don't sign in shame. At least give yourself a little time to listen, to pray, to decide who you want to be after all this." Time seemed to stretch. The pen felt heavier in his hand than any weight he had lifted at the gym. His chest rose and fell like he was running even though he sat still. The lawyer said, "If you walk out of this room today without signing, everything will get messy." Linda said, "Sometimes things have to get messy before they get healed." Brandon looked at the papers, at the faces around the table, at the city beyond the glass, and then back at the woman who cleaned his office when no one was watching, who saw him as more than a broken headline. His hand began to move. Not toward the paper, but away from it. He put the pen down. The lawyer gasped, the banker cursed under his breath, the official's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" his lawyer demanded. "Brandon, this is a mistake." Brandon stood up slowly. His legs felt weak, but there was a strange new strength in his spine. "For the first time in a long time," he said quietly, "I'm not going to make a choice just because I'm scared. I'll answer for what happened. I'll face whoever I need to face, but I'm not going to let fear write my name on these papers today." He turned to Linda. "Ms. Brooks, will you wait for me outside for a minute?" She nodded, surprised. "Yes, sir." She picked up her bucket and walked out of the boardroom, her heart pounding. She did not know what he was going to do next. She did not know that in just a few seconds he was about to make a decision that would shake his entire life in a new way and pull her right into the center of it. Because when Brandon stepped out of that room to speak to her, he was not just a fallen billionaire anymore. He was a man ready to hear the truth from someone the world usually ignored, and the next words he would say to Linda would open a door neither of them ever expected. Linda stepped out of the boardroom, her legs feeling strangely weak. The door closed softly behind her, but she could still hear raised voices on the other side, sharp and angry, like knives being thrown in a small room. She leaned against the cool glass wall in the hallway and took a deep breath. Her yellow gloves were still on, her bucket still in her hand, but her heart felt like it was somewhere inside that room with the man everyone expected to fall quietly. She looked out at the city through the tall windows. The morning light had started to push away the darkness, turning the sky from deep blue to gray. Taxi lights looked smaller now. People were waking up. Some of them she knew were waking up to find out their money was gone. She thought of them. She thought of the workers racing around this floor. She thought of Brandon's pale face when he asked her to wait. "Lord," she whispered, "if I did wrong by speaking up, forgive me, but if I did right, please help him listen to you, not just to fear." She stood there, not moving, even when people rushed past her, phones pressed to their ears. None of them asked why the cleaning lady was standing so still. They were too busy trying to save themselves. Inside the boardroom, the air felt heavier than before. Brandon could feel the pressure of every eye on him as he stood there without the pen in his hand. His lawyer's face was turning red. The banker looked like he wanted to tear the papers in half out of frustration. The government official took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, watching Brandon like he was a strange puzzle. "You understand what this means?" the lawyer said at last, trying to keep his voice low and controlled. "If you walk away from these terms, they won't be gentle. They will say you refuse to cooperate. They will push for charges. The press will eat you alive. You'll lose any chance of protecting what's left." Brandon rubbed his forehead. His head was pounding. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I'm not going to sign today, not like this, not out of fear." The banker spoke next, his tone cold. "With respect, Mr. Cole, this isn't about your feelings. This is about the market, about the image of the system. We need to show people that we acted fast." "You want to show them you acted fast?" Brandon replied, lifting his eyes. "You don't care what happens to the people under all these numbers as long as you can tell the cameras that you did your job." The government official sighed. "What exactly do you plan to do?" he asked. "You can't fix this with one speech. This isn't a movie. The money is gone, the trust is broken, people are angry." "I know," Brandon said. His voice was still soft, but there was something new in it now, like a wire pulled tight. "I'm not asking you to pretend nothing happened. I'm saying I won't walk away without trying to stand in front of this storm myself." The room fell quiet again. At last he took a breath and spoke more clearly. "Here, what I'm going to do, you can write it down if you want. 1. I'll step down as CEO and chairman today, not because I'm running away, but because I need to face this as the one who failed, not the one still trying to control everything. 2. I will cooperate with every investigation, every question, every hearing. You want to know where I ignored warnings? I'll tell you. You want to see how much I took in bonuses while others did the real work? I'll show you." His lawyer looked shocked. "Brandon, you don't have to." "Yes," Brandon cut in. "I do. I spent years saying I was responsible for every success. I need to be responsible for the damage too." He went on, his voice steadying. 3. I want full access for the time being to whatever systems are still standing. Not to hide anything, but to help a small team focus on one thing: how to make things right for the people who trusted us, even if it means I end up with nothing." The banker shook his head. You can't repay all of them, you know that. There are too many accounts, too many losses, you don't have that kind of money now. Brandon nodded slowly. I know I can't fix everything, but I can try to fix something. I won't let lawyers and banks be the only ones deciding who gets help and who doesn't, not this time. The government official studied him carefully. If you refuse these papers now, you may regret it later, he said. You may see prison time, you may lose all personal protection. Are you prepared for that? Brandon thought of his penthouse, his car, his private jet, the fancy restaurants where people knew his name. Then he thought of Dylan's worried face, of the angry clients on the news, of the text messages he had not even opened yet from friends asking, "Is it true?" He thought of Linda's eyes when she said, "Don't let shame write the last line of your story." He swallowed. If prison is what I deserve, I'll face that when it comes, he said. But today I won't sign something just to make your lives easier. I'm going to talk to my team, to my workers, and I'm going to see if there is any way to help the people we hurt. His lawyer sank back in his chair like someone had dropped a rock on his shoulders. Then there's nothing more I can do for you today, he muttered. Brandon nodded once. Then today I'll do it myself, he replied. He turned and left the boardroom without waiting for permission. The door opened with a soft click and he stepped into the hallway like a man leaving a battlefield. Linda straightened when she saw him. His suit was still expensive, but for the first time he didn't look like a king. He looked like a tired man who had finally put down a crown he didn't know how to carry anymore. You stayed, he said quietly. Yes, she answered, you asked me to. He gave a small, humorless smile. I'm not used to people actually listening when I ask for something that doesn't come with money attached, he said, then his face grew serious again. Thank you for what you said in there. She shrugged a little. Sometimes people need someone who's not afraid to talk to them like a human, she replied, not like a headline. He nodded slowly. I'm going to step down, he told her. I'm not signing their papers yet, but I'm leaving the top seat. I'm going to call a meeting with anyone who still works here and tell them the truth. She searched his face. Are you sure you're ready to really tell it? He looked away for a moment, then back. I'm not sure, he admitted, but I'm going to try. He hesitated, then added, would you stay on this floor a little longer? I know it sounds strange, but I don't want to walk through this alone. She thought about her tired feet, about the bus she would probably miss again, about the long day ahead. Then she thought about her daughter's message, the fear in those words. She thought about how many times she had told her own children to stand up and do the right thing even when it was hard. I'll stay, she said softly, for a while. Half an hour later, the main conference hall on the 28th floor was packed. Some people stood against the walls, arms crossed. Others sat in chairs, fidgeting with phones they were too scared to look at. Some had dark circles under their eyes from being up all night. Others had tears they tried to hide. Brandon stood at the front of the room, a simple microphone in his hand. Behind him, the big screen that usually showed colorful charts was blank. There were no fancy slides today. Linda slipped quietly in at the back, her cleaning cart parked near the door. She stood by the wall, watching. She could feel the anger in the room like heat. Brandon looked out at them. These were the people who had helped him build the empire: code writers, call center agents, account managers, security guards, receptionists, people from all levels packed into one room for once, people whose lives were now shaking because of decisions he had made. Good morning, he started. His voice came out hoarse. I know this is not really a good morning for any of us. A bitter laugh came from somewhere near the front. He nodded. You've seen the news, he continued. Or you've heard enough rumors to know this. Yes, the attack is real. Yes, we lost control of our systems. Yes, many of our clients had their accounts emptied or frozen. Yes, the merger is on hold. Yes, this is a disaster. People shifted in their seats. Some looked down, unable to meet his eyes. He took a breath. Most of you already know what kind of person I am at work, he said. I push hard, too hard. I want results. I hate delays. I have said many times that feelings don't build empires, that results do. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Last night, he went on, I was sitting in a room upstairs with lawyers, bankers, and officials. They brought me a stack of papers. Papers that would let me walk away with some protection, some money, and a chance to say, it wasn't all my fault. He paused. I almost signed. He could feel the weight of the moment, like everyone holding their breath. But then, he said slowly, someone I've never really listened to before walked into that room and reminded me that my life is not just about what I own. She reminded me that if I spend my whole life running from mistakes, I'll always be running. I'm tired of running. Linda's eyes filled with tears. She stared down at her gloved hands. So I made a decision, Brandon said. I am stepping down as your CEO. I won't be leading you anymore. I lost that right when I stopped listening and started treating your warnings like noise, but before I go, there is something I have to do. A man near the front shouted, "What? Give us our jobs back, you ruined us, man." The room stirred louder. Brandon let the noise rise then fall. I can't fix everything, he said honestly. I can't pretend that I can fill every lost account. That would be a lie, but I can do this. I can stand in front of the people who were hurt and say, I am sorry, I should have listened. This is on me. Not on the intern who brought the risk report, not on the team that begged for updates, not on the cleaners, not on the security guards, on me. Another voice called out, sorry doesn't pay rent. I know, Brandon said quietly. That's why I'm not stopping at sorry. I'm forming a small team of people who are willing to help me go through what's left of our data, our backups, our insurance, our assets, and find real ways to help as many of our clients and staff as we can. We may not be able to save everything, but right now they have plans that protect the system first, the rich partners second, and regular people last. That's not okay with me anymore. There was silence again, not calm silence, heavy silence, thinking silence. I won't pay you with promises of big bonuses, he added. I can't even promise you'll keep your jobs, but if any of you are willing to stay a little longer and work on a recovery plan that puts people first, I'll be right there with you, not as your boss, as the man who broke this and is trying to help fix it. For a moment, nobody moved. Brandon felt his stomach twist. Maybe Linda was wrong, maybe this was foolish, maybe no one would stay. Then a hand went up. It was Dylan, the young IT worker with round glasses. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. I'll help, he said. I warned you before, but I want to help now too. I don't want to just watch this burn. Another hand, a middle-aged woman from the finance team. I'll help, she said softly. I know where some of the smaller accounts are, the ones everyone ignores. A man from customer service raised his hand. My team's been hearing people cry all night, he said. If there's anything we can do besides reading a script, we'll do it. Not everyone stayed. Some people walked out, faces tight, shaking their heads. Brandon didn't blame them. He watched them go with sadness, not anger. They had families, bills, fear. They had every right to protect themselves. But when it was over, there was a small group left, not many, maybe 20. But their eyes were tired and strong. They were ready to fight for something better than headlines. Thank you, Brandon said quietly. Meet me in the old training room on the 12th floor in 1 hour. We'll start there. The crowd began to break apart. Linda stayed by the wall as people moved past her. Some didn't even see her. Others gave her a quick nod like they felt something had shifted in the building, but they didn't know what. Later, in the small training room, whiteboards covered the walls. Old markers lay in a plastic tray. There was still a faded chart from some past seminar that said vision, growth, success. Brandon stood at the board, marker in hand. He had written 3 new words at the top in big letters. Truth, people, repair. The team sat around folding tables. Dylan opened his laptop. The finance woman had a folder of printouts. The customer service man had a notebook full of names and short, shaky notes like lost house deposit and can't pay for surgery. Brandon looked at those notes and felt his throat tighten. These weren't just clients, they were lives. Linda came in quietly and put a tray of paper cups and a big jug of water on a side table. She didn't sit with them. She wasn't a manager or a tech worker. But she stayed in the room, wiping a shelf that didn't really need wiping, listening. Okay, Brandon said, no speeches now, let's talk real. Dylan, what are we dealing with? Dylan pushed his glasses up. The main servers took heavy damage, he said simply. Some data is gone for good, but not all. We have partial backups, off-site copies, some are slow, some messy. If we stop listening to the people upstairs who only care about the biggest accounts, we might save a lot of smaller ones too. The finance woman added, there are emergency funds we never talk about. Small pools of money meant for brand protection, so that if a big client complains, we can quietly pay them to keep them happy. That money could be spread across hundreds of smaller accounts. Brandon felt anger rise not at her but at himself. You mean we've had money set aside to protect our image but not clearly to protect regular people? She hesitated. It's how the system works, she said softly. We follow orders. Not anymore, he answered. The customer service man spoke. We made a list of the hardest cases, he said. The ones that broke us last night when we heard them, people who lost everything, people with sick kids, people on the edge. He slid the notebook forward. If we can help even some of them, it might matter. Brandon flipped through the pages. Each line felt like a stone placed on his chest. A single mother who lost her small savings, an elderly man whose pension account disappeared, a family who had been saving for a wheelchair. So many names, so many quiet dreams shattered by lines of code and careless decisions. He set the notebook down gently. We start with them, he said, and we track every step, no lies, no hiding. If we can't help someone, we tell them the truth. We stop giving pretty answers and start being honest. Dylan nodded. We'll need permission to dig into certain systems, he warned. The new temporary leaders might not like that. Brandon gave a tired smile. Then they can come find me, he said. If I'm going to fall, I want to know I fell doing something right for once. In the corner, Linda felt tears slide down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly with the back of her glove. She had seen a lot of bosses come and go in different buildings. Very few ever said things like this. By mid-afternoon, Brandon finally stepped outside the building. The glass doors opened into a storm of flashing cameras and loud voices. Reporters lined the sidewalk, microphones held out like weapons, shouting questions that rolled into each other. Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say to the families who lost everything? Did you ignore security warnings to push the merger? Are you hiding any of your personal assets? Do you think you'll go to prison? Security guards came closer, ready to push the crowd back. For a moment, Brandon wanted to hide behind them, duck into a waiting car, and let some PR person send out a safe, polished email instead. Then he heard Linda's voice in his memory again. Don't sign in panic, don't sign in shame. At least give yourself a little time to listen, to pray, to decide who you want to be after all this. He held up a hand. It's okay, he told the guards. Let them come a little closer. The crowd pushed in but stayed behind the thin rope line. Cameras zoomed in on his tired face. I won't answer every question today, he said, his voice carrying across the busy street. There are things I still don't know, but I can tell you this: yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I ignored some warnings. I was in a hurry to grow. I wanted to be the best, the biggest, and in that rush I treated people like numbers. That was wrong. The reporters quieted for a moment. Honesty was not something they heard every day. I am stepping down as CEO, he went on. I will answer for what I did in front of the right authorities, but I will also spend every breath I have now trying to help the people who trusted us. If you want a villain, I understand. If you want someone to blame, here I am. But if you want the truth, sometimes it's more complicated than one headline. I'm ready to tell it when the time comes. A woman from one of the news stations raised her mic. Why should anyone trust you now? She asked. He thought for a moment. Maybe they shouldn't, he replied. Not yet. Trust isn't a speech, it's time and proof. I can't ask for trust. I can only earn it, if I ever do, by what I do next. He turned, walked back into the building, and let the doors close behind him. Cameras still flashed, but for the first time he felt like he was not acting a part. He was just himself, broken, scared, but trying. Hours later, when the building finally grew quiet again, Brandon found Linda in the small staff break room on the lower floor. The vending machines hummed softly. The air smelled like old coffee and cleaning spray. She sat at a round table, peeling an orange slowly, her shoulders slouched from the long day. Ms. Brooks, he said from the doorway. She looked up, surprised. You should be resting, she said. You've had a long night and day. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I could say the same to you, he answered. May I sit? She smiled faintly. You're already sitting, she replied, so yes. He let out a tired chuckle. For a moment they just sat there, two very different lives at the same small table. I wanted to ask you something, he began. Why did you do it? Why did you walk into that room? You could have lost your job. She looked down at the orange in her hand. Maybe, she said, but I've lost important things before. A job is not the only thing that can be taken from you. She took a breath. I walked in because I saw a man about to let fear decide who he is, and I've seen where that leads. I've seen husbands walk away from their families because they felt too ashamed to stay. I've seen people stop trying because they made one big mistake. I didn't want that for you, not because you're rich, just because you're human. He studied her face. There were small lines near her eyes from years of worry and laughter. You talk like someone who's been through a war, he said softly. In my own way, I have, she replied, just not the kind that makes the news. Tell me, he said, if you want to. She hesitated. Very few people ever asked about her story. Most of the time, she was just the cleaning lady, invisible, replaceable. But this man, the one whose name was on the building, had looked straight at her and said, "Tell me." So she did. She told him about her husband, David, who had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. About how one evening he came home complaining of chest pain, but they waited, thinking it was just stress. By the time they reached the hospital, it was too late. She told him about her daughter Kim, strong and stubborn, who had worked her way through community college but had been hit by a strange illness that refused to leave, leaving her weak and always in doctors' offices. She told him about her grandson, a bright 8-year-old boy who asked too many questions and loved superheroes. We were not rich, she said quietly, but we had our little plans, a small savings here, a few dollars there. I cleaned offices. Kim worked part-time when she could. We saved for tests the insurance wouldn't cover, for medicine that wasn't cheap. Every dollar had a name. Brandon listened, his throat tight. She went on, about a year ago. We put what we could into a special account at a bank that promised extra security and fast growth. They said they used a famous data company to keep our money safe. I didn't understand all the terms. I just heard the word safe and thought, good, at least this part of our life is protected. Brandon's fingers curled slowly against the table. He had a sick feeling he already knew what she was going to say next. Last night, she said, her voice shaking slightly, after I heard all the shouting upstairs, after I saw the fear on people's faces, I went downstairs on my break and checked our account on my phone. She swallowed. The screen said there was a problem. I tried again and again. This morning my daughter called me crying. The money we saved for her next test, it's gone. The room felt suddenly very small. The vending machine hum grew louder in his ears. You lost money too?" he asked, barely above a whisper. She looked him in the eye and he could see the pain that had been sitting under her calm all day. "Yes," she said. "I am one of those small clients no one talks about on TV, just a cleaner with a broken family trying to hold on." He leaned back slowly, the air leaving his lungs. The cleaning lady who had talked him out of signing those papers was not just a kind stranger. She was one of his victims, one of thousands, and he had never even known. "How much?" he asked hoarsely. "Maybe not much to you," she replied gently. "But to us, everything we had left, enough for one more set of tests, enough to keep the landlord calm, enough to let my grandson sleep without hearing adults whisper about money at night." His hands shook under the table. He couldn't find any words to cover the shame spreading through him like cold water. "I'm so sorry," he finally managed. "I didn't know I did." She lifted a hand. "I know you didn't do it just to hurt me," she said. "You didn't even know my name until today. That's part of the problem, isn't it? You made decisions that touched people you never saw." He closed his eyes for a moment. She was right. All those years of clicking approve, of signing off on budgets, of pushing for speed, those choices had reached all the way down to this break room, this woman, this little family he had never met. "I'm going to find your account," he said suddenly, opening his eyes again. "I'm going to see exactly what happened to it, not because you spoke up, not as a favor, but because it's right. You deserve to know, and if there is anything I can do," he shook his head. "I owe you that. I owe you more than that." Her eyes softened. "I don't want you to just fix my account," she said. "If that's all you do, you'll only change my story. There are so many others. If this pain is what finally opens your eyes, then use it. Don't waste it." He nodded slowly. "I won't," he said. He stood up, his legs still unsteady but moving with purpose. Can I ask one more thing?" he added quietly. She tilted her head. "What is it?" "When you pray," he said, voice barely steady, "could you say something for me too, not to make me rich again, just so I don't run back to the man I was before when this storm dies down? I'm afraid of that." A small, warm smile touched her face. "I already did," she answered, "and I will again." Back upstairs, the building had grown quieter. The sun had moved across the sky, casting long shadows across the office floors. Some desks were already empty, their owners gone for good. The air felt different now, not just scared but waiting. Brandon went straight to a small side office on the tech floor. It was one of the secure rooms only a few had access to. Inside were terminals that could look into parts of their system the average worker never saw. Dylan was there, eyes fixed on a screen full of lines and numbers. "You're still here," Brandon said. Dylan looked up, surprised. "I said I'd help," he replied. "I meant it." "I need you to look up a specific account," Brandon said, "a small one belonging to someone named Linda Brooks." Dylan's fingers started typing. "What happened?" he asked. "She's one of us," Brandon said quietly, "and she lost everything." The search results appeared, lines of text scrolling across the screen. Dylan clicked, opened, scrolled some more. His face changed from focused to troubled. "This is strange," he murmured. "Her account is just lost, it's marked." "Marked how?" Brandon asked, leaning in. Dylan pointed at a small code. "See this? It's in a batch that was routed through a special channel, not the normal process. It went through something labeled Priority Diversion 7. I've seen that label on a few other accounts too. They were pulled out before the main crash hit." "Pulled out to where?" Brandon demanded, his heart starting to pound again. Dylan hesitated. "That's what worries me," he said. "These records say they were moved for protection, but the final destination isn't clear. It jumps to an internal code tied to finance and stops." "Finance?" Brandon felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "Can you print this?" he asked. Dylan nodded, hit a few keys, and a small printer in the corner whirred to life. Brandon grabbed the pages, scanned them quickly. There were other names there too, small accounts, medium accounts, not the big, famous investors, ordinary people, all moved into a shadowy corner of the system that didn't show where their money went. He thought of the finance woman in the training room, of the brand protection funds she had mentioned, of the quiet ways they moved money when they didn't want noise. He thought of one other name, Ethan Price, his chief financial officer, the one who had said the security updates cost too much, the one who controlled how money moved in the dark. Without another word, Brandon left the room and walked down the hall, the papers clenched in his hand. Each step felt heavier, each breath felt sharper, his mind raced with questions he didn't want to ask but had to. He reached Ethan's office. The door was almost closed, just a small gap open. He lifted his hand to knock, then stopped. A voice drifted through the gap. "Ethan," low, tense, and nothing like the smooth, confident tone he used in meetings. "I told you I did what you asked," Ethan was saying. "The funds were moved before the attack, yes, all of them. No, nobody saw. They still think it's part of the breach. They're too busy blaming Brandon. The wires hit the private account yesterday. I checked, you got your money." Brandon's heart dropped like a stone. His fingers pressed into the papers so hard they crumpled. He leaned closer, hardly breathing. On the other side of the door, Ethan continued in a harsh whisper, "Listen, I risked everything for this. If this goes wrong, I'm finished. But as long as he keeps playing the hero and taking the blame, we're in the clear." Brandon's world, which he thought had already shattered, cracked open again in a new way. The attack, the delays, the blocked updates, the missing accounts, the cleaning lady's lost savings. This wasn't just his pride and blindness. Someone close to him had used the chaos for something darker. His closest money man had not only failed him, he had betrayed him. Brandon reached for the door handle, his hand trembling. And that was the moment he had to decide. Would he burst in with anger and fists or step back and plan his next move carefully, knowing that this truth could change everything again, not just for him, but for every single broken person waiting for help? Brandon's hand gripped the silver handle of the office door, his knuckles white. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, loud and unsteady. Ethan's voice inside the room continued, smooth but strained, the kind of voice used by a man trying to sound calm while standing too close to fire. "I told you," Ethan said quietly, "he'll take the blame. Brandon's too proud to point fingers. He'll call it his mistake, not mine. That's what makes him so easy to use." There was a pause. A second voice spoke through the phone on Ethan's desk, muffled but sharp. "You'd better hope you're right. If anyone finds out about those transfers, it won't just be him going down, it'll be you. And you know what happens when men like you get exposed." Ethan's chair creaked. "It won't happen," he said quickly. "By the time anyone looks at those accounts, it'll all look like part of the cyberattack. Everyone's focused on him. The money's gone, clean and quiet. Brandon's breath caught. His mind replayed the words gone, clean and quiet. He thought about the single mother who lost her house deposit, the old man whose pension vanished, Linda's daughter whose medical savings had disappeared overnight. He thought about his promise to make things right and how deep the betrayal ran inside his own walls. He stepped back from the door slowly. His chest felt tight not just from anger but from disbelief. Ethan wasn't just an employee, he had been there from the beginning. They had built Skyline together in that tiny shared office, eating cheap takeout while working through the night. Ethan was supposed to be the calm, logical one, the one who handled the books while Brandon dreamed. Now that same man had stolen what was left of the company's soul. Brandon turned away and walked down the hall fast, every step echoing in the silent corridor. His mind raced between fury and heartbreak. He could have stormed in, yelled, called the police, or thrown Ethan's name into the media storm outside. But the voice inside his head, the voice that had been quiet for so long, the one that sounded like his father, said, "Don't just react, think." He needed proof, real proof, not just overheard words. He needed to see where the money had gone, who was involved, and how deep it reached. If he went in now with only anger, Ethan would deny everything, erase what he could, and make Brandon look like a desperate man trying to drag someone else down with him. So he kept walking. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, breathing heavily, trying to calm himself. The city outside glowed in the late afternoon light, tall shadows stretching across the floor. Every reflection in the glass looked like a ghost of the man he used to be, the man who trusted too easily. When he reached the 12th floor again, the recovery team was still there. Dylan sat by the computers, lines of code running fast across the screens. The others looked tired but focused, coffee cups and papers scattered around them. "Mr. Cole," Dylan said when he saw him, "we found some new patterns in the transfer logs, you should see this." "Not yet," Brandon said. His voice was steady but his eyes were sharp. "Before we go further, I need your help with something else, and I need you to keep this between us." Dylan nodded slowly. "Of course." Brandon handed him the papers he had taken from the printer earlier, the ones marked Priority Diversion 7. "These accounts," he said, "I just found out they were pulled out before the breach. I need to know exactly where they went, but you can't use the main servers. Ethan might still be watching." Dylan frowned. "You think Ethan?" "I don't think," Brandon said. "I know, but we can't prove it yet, not until we follow the trail." Dylan's expression hardened. "All right," he said quietly. "Give me a few hours, I'll use one of the old backup nodes, he won't see it." Brandon nodded. "Good," and Dylan, "Thank you." As Dylan got to work, Brandon sank into a chair at the edge of the room. His hands were trembling slightly. He ran them through his hair and stared at the blank whiteboard. The words he had written earlier, truth, people, repair, looked different now. He whispered to himself, "Maybe before we repair, we have to face everything that's still rotten." Downstairs, Linda finished wiping the last of the stair railings. Her back ached, but her mind wasn't on the work. It was on Brandon. She had seen the look in his eyes when he left the break room, something fierce, something heavy. She didn't know what he had found, but she knew that when someone decides to face their truth, the road ahead never stays easy. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from her daughter, Kim. "Mom, the doctor's office called. They'll see me again on Monday. Don't worry about the payment yet. We'll figure something out." Linda's eyes watered. She typed back, "Keep your faith, baby. I'm proud of you. I'll be home soon." She put the phone away and whispered softly, "Lord, please give that man upstairs wisdom, not anger, wisdom." Hours passed. Night fell again over New York. The skyline outside was a sea of silver lights and glass reflections. In the quiet training room, the hum of computers was the only sound. Dylan finally looked up from his screen, dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I think I found it." Brandon rushed over. "Show me." Dylan pointed at a string of data. The accounts labeled Priority Diversion 7 didn't disappear. They were redirected, split into smaller parts, and moved through dummy shells. The final destination is a private offshore fund registered under a holding name, EPC Investments. Brandon froze. "EPC," he repeated softly. Dylan nodded. "It's an abbreviation, Ethan P. Cole." Brandon's head snapped up. "Cole." "Yeah," Dylan said. "He used your last name in the registration. probably to make it look like one of your personal companies. He even used the same initials as his own, Ethan Price Cole. The weight of it hit Brandon like a punch. The man had not only stolen from him, he had used his name to do it. Dylan turned his screen toward him. There's more. The fund links to two other names, anonymous partners. The transactions show one major withdrawal right before the system crash. $15 million gone. Brandon took a deep breath. His hands were cold. He looked at Dylan. Can you back this up quietly? Dylan nodded. Already doing it. I've got copies on an external drive that isn't connected to the main system. Good, Brandon said. Keep that drive safe. Don't tell anyone, not even the others. What are you going to do? Dylan asked. Brandon looked at the window, the city lights flickering against his reflection. I'm going to give him one chance to tell the truth. After that, I'll show the world who he really is. The next morning, the air outside Skyline Tower was cold and bright. The streets below were still crowded with reporters, but their voices were softer now, waiting for the next headline. Brandon arrived early. He hadn't slept, but he didn't care. He went straight to the top floor. Ethan's office door was open this time, the man inside sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Brandon, Ethan said, forcing a smile. Rough few days, huh? You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't, Brandon said evenly. We need to talk. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Sure, but make it quick. I've got calls with the liquidation team. Brandon closed the door behind him and locked it. The click made Ethan glance up, confused. What's this about? Ethan asked. Brandon stepped forward and dropped the papers onto the desk. It's about this. Ethan glanced down, pretending to read. What's this supposed to be? You tell me, Brandon said coldly. It's a list of accounts rerouted before the breach. All labeled priority diversion 7, all sent to a shell company registered under EPC Investments. Care to explain why my initials are being used to hide stolen money? Ethan's smile faded. You're accusing me now. I'm giving you a chance, Brandon said, his voice low and steady. One chance to tell the truth before I take this to the authorities. Ethan laughed nervously. Come on, Brandon, you think I'd steal from you, from the company we built? You must be exhausted. This is just a misunderstanding. Stop lying, Brandon snapped. His voice cracked like thunder in the quiet office. I heard you yesterday on the phone. I know everything. Ethan froze, his eyes darted to the window, then back. You were listening. Yes, Brandon said. And now I have proof to match your words. You moved funds out before the attack. You used the breach to cover your tracks. You let people suffer while you lined your pockets. Ethan's mask began to slip. His jaw tightened. You don't know how deep this goes, he said quietly. You think you're the only one who made deals. You wanted that merger so badly you ignored half the red flags. You're not innocent, Brandon. You just didn't look at where the money came from. Brandon stepped closer. Maybe not, but I never stole from the people who trusted me. Ethan smirked. You think telling the world will fix that? Go ahead, they'll still drag your name through the mud. You'll go down too, you'll lose everything for good. I already did, Brandon said. The difference is I can live with the truth, can you? Ethan's eyes narrowed. You won't survive this. Brandon leaned forward, his voice a whisper. I already survived losing everything once. I'm not afraid anymore. He turned and walked toward the door. Ethan stood abruptly. If you walk out with that information, you'll regret it, he warned. Brandon stopped. Maybe, he said, but at least I won't be the kind of man who lets innocent people pay for my greed. He unlocked the door and left. That evening, Brandon called a press conference. He didn't tell anyone what it was about. He simply sent out a short statement. Skyline Data Group will release a full internal report tonight. The truth will not stay buried. By the time cameras filled the building's lobby, the world was waiting again. Linda watched the broadcast from the small staff room, standing beside other cleaners and guards. Her heart pounded. Brandon stepped up to the podium. The bright lights hit his tired face, but his eyes were clear. Good evening, he began. I told you I would tell the truth, so here it is. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. The data breach that destroyed Skyline was not just an outside attack. It was help from the inside. My own chief financial officer, Ethan Price, created hidden channels to move funds out of the company before the attack. He used the chaos to cover his theft. Thousands of innocent clients, families, small business owners, even some of our employees lost their savings because of his actions. The reporters erupted with questions, but he lifted a hand to stop them. "I am not blameless," he said firmly. "My pride blinded me, my greed made me ignore warnings, but I will not protect corruption. The proof has been turned over to the authorities. I am cooperating fully, and to those who lost everything because of this company, I owe you more than words." He looked down, then back up. "I can't promise to rebuild an empire, but I can promise to rebuild trust one life at a time, starting with the people who believed in us the most." Linda's chest tightened as she listened. She felt tears sting her eyes. Around her, other workers stood still, silent, watching the man who had once walked past them like they were invisible now speak like one of them. When the broadcast ended, reporters shouted questions again, but Brandon simply said, "No more talking, time to act." 2 days later, Ethan was arrested. The headlines changed from "Billionaire Collapse" to "CFO Exposed in Massive Fraud." The police found offshore accounts linking Ethan to multiple shell companies and 2 outside partners who were also caught trying to leave the country. The same news that had once painted Brandon as a careless billionaire now called him the man who brought truth to light. But Brandon didn't care about the headlines anymore. He cared about the faces of the people he met every day, the ones rebuilding their lives from the wreckage. He personally called Linda's daughter, Kim. With the recovery team's help, her lost funds were traced and part of them returned. Brandon visited the small apartment where Linda lived, bringing flowers for Kim and a small box of documents. "I can't fix the past," he told them softly, "but I want to start here." Kim smiled weakly from the couch. "My mom said you were different," she said. She was right. Linda stood quietly behind him, her eyes warm. "You kept your promise," she said. Brandon looked at her. "I had to," he said. "You reminded me that a life without integrity isn't a life worth saving." Weeks passed. The building that once symbolized his empire now served a new purpose. Brandon turned part of it into a community tech center, free digital training, financial literacy workshops, and a safe space for small businesses to learn how to protect themselves online. He called it the Restart Project. Linda joined as one of the coordinators. "I don't know much about technology," she had laughed when he first asked, "but I know people, I know how to listen." "That's exactly why I need you," Brandon had replied. Dylan helped run the technical side. The small team grew not with ambition for money but with passion for purpose. Every week people came in with stories of loss, recovery, and hope. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the windows, Brandon stood at the back of the room watching a group of teenagers learning coding for the first time. Linda was showing them how to clean up their workspace when they were done, laughing softly when one boy spilled his drink. He smiled. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Linda noticed him standing there and walked over. "You look like a man who finally remembered what breathing feels like," she said gently. He laughed quietly. "Maybe I did." She looked out at the group of young people. "You know," she said, "sometimes God breaks us not to destroy us but to rebuild us in a way we never would have chosen." Brandon nodded. "I used to think success was having power over people. Now I think it's being able to serve them." She smiled. "Then I'd say you're finally rich again." He looked at her, eyes warm with gratitude. "If I'm rich in anything now," he said, "it's because people like you showed me what wealth really means." Outside, the city buzzed as always, cars, voices, lights, endless motion. But inside that building, a man who once ruled the skyline now understood something far greater than power: redemption. And though the world would always remember him as the billionaire who lost everything, he knew the truth was bigger. He was the man who found his soul again because one cleaning lady refused to stay silent. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the sound of people breathing. Cameras were not allowed inside, but everyone knew the world was waiting outside the doors, ready to post every word as soon as someone stepped out. Dark wooden benches were filled with people, former clients, reporters with notebooks, workers from Skyline, a few strangers who just wanted to see the fallen billionaire in real life. At the front, under the high windows and bright lights, Brandon Cole stood next to his lawyer, hands clasped in front of him. He wore a simple gray suit now, not the sharp, expensive ones he used to wear. His hair was shorter and his face looked thinner, older but calmer. Across the room, Linda sat on one of the benches, her hands folded tightly around her small purse. She had changed into her best church dress, a neat navy blue one, and her grandson sat beside her, swinging his feet nervously. Kim had stayed home to rest, but she had squeezed her mother's hand that morning and whispered, "Tell him we're praying." Linda watched Brandon's back and silently did the same. A tall man in a dark robe, the judge, shuffled some papers and looked down at them over his glasses. On the table near him lay a thick file with bold letters on top, the state V's, Brandon Cole. Next to it was another file even thicker, the state V's, ETHAN Price and others. Ethan wasn't in the room. His trial had already started separately, full of cold evidence and hidden accounts, but today wasn't really about him. Today was the day the world would see what would happen to the man who used to own the city skyline. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, please step forward." Brandon walked to the front, every step heavy but steady. His lawyer whispered, "Remember what we discussed. You still have the option to push responsibility for the fraud toward Ethan. You were careless, yes, but not directly involved in the theft. We can argue for no jail time." Brandon shook his head once softly. "No more half-truths," he murmured. "If I get mercy, it has to be real, not something I bought with clever words." His lawyer sighed, but he didn't argue again. Brandon looked up at the judge. For a moment there was only silence. Then the judge began to speak, his voice echoing through the room. "Mr. Cole," he said, "you stand before this court today not as a man who simply made one mistake, but as a man whose decisions over time allowed many wrongs to happen. You ignored warnings, you rushed deals, you trusted profits over people. Because of that, thousands of lives were shaken, savings were lost, futures were changed." A small sound came from the back, someone stifling a sob. "At the same time," the judge continued, "you were the one who came forward with full evidence against your own chief financial officer. You did not hide behind lawyers or excuses. You worked with your former employees to recover what could be saved. You helped set up support for victims. You have in many ways done more to expose this crime than anyone else involved. That makes this case different and more complicated." Brandon swallowed, his chest felt tight but he stood straight. "Before I read my decision," the judge said, "do you have anything you would like to say?" Brandon turned just slightly so he could face the room. He saw rows of faces, angry faces, hurt faces, curious faces. He saw Linda's eyes, soft but strong. He saw Dylan sitting a few rows behind her, his hands on his knees. He took a breath. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Not just once but many times. I built a life where I was the center of everything. I thought success meant never slowing down, never showing weakness, never admitting fear. But when you live like that, you stop hearing the people who are trying to save you from yourself. My team tried to warn me, I brushed them off. My systems were weak, I looked the other way. People trusted me with their money, and I thought that gave me the right to rush and gamble with their safety." He paused, his voice shaking. "I didn't plan the theft. I didn't sit down and decide to steal anyone's savings, but my pride opened the door for someone else to do it. That doesn't make me innocent. It makes me responsible in a different way." His eyes found Linda. "A woman who cleans offices for a living had more courage and wisdom than I did in that moment when she walked into a room full of powerful men and asked me not to sign away my soul. She reminded me that my life is not just mine, that what I do touches people I've never even met. She lost money too, and yet she still spoke up for me." He looked back at the judge. "Whatever you decide today, I accept it. If I have to lose my freedom for a time, maybe that's the last part of me that still needs to break. I only ask one thing, that the people who were hurt get as much back as possible before I get anything at all. They deserve that much." The judge watched him for a long moment. The room remained silent. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," he said at last. He picked up the file, opened it, and began to read. "After reviewing all evidence, considering your actions before and after the breach, and listening to the victims and your own confession, the court has reached a decision." Every heart in the room seemed to stop. "This court sentences you," the judge said slowly, "to 3 years in state custody, with the possibility of early release under strict supervision if you continue to cooperate in all ongoing investigations and restitution plans. In addition, upon release, you will be required to complete 5 years of community service focused on financial education and support for low-income families. You are also barred from leading or managing any financial institution for a long period set by law." A low murmur filled the room. Some people were angry it wasn't longer, others were surprised it was not lighter. Linda felt her heart drop and rise all at once. Prison, but also a chance to come back and still do good. The judge's voice softened slightly just for a second. "You can't change what you did, Mr. Cole," he said, "but you can decide what kind of man you will be after this. Don't waste your second chance." The gavel hit the desk, the sound was final. Behind him, a guard stepped forward and gently touched Brandon's arm. "It's time," he said quietly. Brandon nodded. Before he turned to go, he looked at the bench where Linda sat. Their eyes met. He gave her a small, grateful nod and mouthed two words she read clearly: "Thank you." She nodded back, her eyes shining. "Keep going," she whispered, even though he could not hear. As he was led away, the flash of cameras outside the courtroom doors lit up the hallway like lightning. The world would talk about the billionaire who went to prison. But Linda knew a different story had just started, the story of who he would be when he came out. Hi friends, before we go deeper into this final part of the story, if you're still watching and listening, please don't forget to like this video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Are you in New York, Lagos, London, Accra, Houston, South Africa, or somewhere else in the world? And make sure you subscribe to this channel to support our growth so we can keep sharing powerful, emotional, life-changing stories. Now, let's see what happens next in Brandon's journey. Prison was nothing like the movies. It wasn't loud all the time. It wasn't full of fights every day. Most of the time, it was quiet in a heavy, sad way. The days were long and simple: wake up, count, work, eat, wait, sleep, repeat. Brandon was given a small room with a metal bed, a thin mattress, a gray blanket, and a tiny shelf where he could keep a few books. The first night, he sat on the bed with his back against the cold wall and stared at the ceiling. There were no city lights here, no glass walls, no big screens, no stock charts, no flashing alerts. Just himself and the thoughts he had tried to outrun for years. He thought of the office, of the boardroom, of the faces in the courtroom. He thought of Ethan, now in a different prison, facing his own sentence. He thought of all the people he had never seen but had hurt by letting greed grow like a weed. The next morning, a guard took him to the workshop area. Men in simple uniforms were fixing old chairs, sorting boxes, cleaning equipment. Nobody cared that he used to be rich. Here, everyone wore the same clothes. Here, his old life meant nothing. At first, some people watched him with cold eyes. "That's the tech guy," someone whispered, "the rich one who lost everything." Brandon kept his head down and worked. He swept floors, scrubbed tables, moved boxes. He listened more than he talked. He heard bits of stories: a father who stole to feed his family, a boy who made one bad decision at the wrong time, a man who had never been given a real chance and didn't know what to do with his anger. In the evenings, he sat in the small prison library. The books were old, their pages yellow, but they were full of voices from other times. He read about leaders who fell and stood up again. He read about people who had nothing and yet found ways to change the world from the bottom. He read about forgiveness not as an easy thing but as a hard, slow choice. One day, a soft-spoken chaplain, an older man with kind eyes and a worn Bible, sat down across from him. "You're the one from the news, aren't you?" the chaplain asked. "I was," Brandon said quietly. "Now I'm just another guy in gray." The chaplain smiled a little. "Sometimes that's when we finally see who we really are," he replied, "when all the titles are gone." They talked for a long time, about guilt, about pride, about how hard it was to forgive yourself when you saw the damage you had done. "I don't want to ever forget what I did," Brandon said. "I don't want to make excuses, but I also don't want to stay stuck in shame forever. I want my pain to mean something." "Then let it push you toward service," the chaplain said gently. "Every day you wake up, ask yourself, how can I make someone else's load lighter today? That's how you start writing a new story." So he tried. In the workshop, when a new inmate came in looking lost and scared, Brandon showed him how to use the tools and avoid trouble. In the library, he helped some of the men learn to read bank statements and not fall for scams. He shared simple things about budgeting and saving, not with pride but with quiet, careful words. He never talked much about being a billionaire. Instead, he talked about all the ways chasing money too hard had broken his life. "Money is a good tool," he would say softly, "but a terrible master." Outside, life kept moving. Linda went on working at the Restart project building, which now had a new leadership team made of former workers and community leaders. The sign on the door no longer said Skyline Data. It now carried three simple words: restart, restore, rise. Linda had been asked to take on more responsibility, not just as a cleaner but as a sort of heart for the center. She greeted people when they walked in, listened to their stories, and made sure no one felt small or invisible. Her grandson, now a little older, spent many afternoons there after school, sitting in the computer lab, learning to code from Dylan and the other volunteers. Sometimes, when the office was quiet and the sun was setting just right, shining through the glass in soft orange lines, Linda would stand by the big window and think about how much had changed. A year ago, she had been just another hidden worker in a tall building that didn't know her name. Now, she still cleaned, but she also helped shape decisions. People came to her with questions, with worries, with ideas. One evening, Kim walked into the center, her steps slow but stronger than before. Her fight with sickness was not over, but the new tests and treatments, paid for partly by recovered funds from the stolen accounts and partly by donations that had come in after Brandon's public confession, had given her fresh hope. "Nice place, Mom," she said, looking around at the bright posters, the busy computers, the small group of people in a workshop learning how to read contracts. "Feels safe." Linda smiled. "That's the idea," she said. "A place where people can learn and not feel stupid for asking questions, a place where money is a servant, not a master." Kim looked at the photo on the wall near the entrance. A simple picture of a group of people, some in suits, some in casual clothes, some in uniforms, standing together in front of the building. Brandon was there too, in the middle, wearing a plain shirt, holding a small sign that said, "We start again." "You still visit him?" Kim asked gently. "Whenever I can," Linda said. "We sit in a little room with a thick glass window and talk through a phone. He tells me about the classes he teaches inside. I tell him about the kids here, the families, the changes. It helps both of us remember why all this pain wasn't wasted." Kim nodded. "Do you forgive him?" Linda looked down at her hands for a long moment. "Forgiveness isn't a feeling that falls on you," she said slowly. "It's a choice you make again and again, especially on the days you're still angry. I forgave him the day I saw him choose truth over pride. I keep forgiving him when I see him use his new life to lift others." She looked up, her eyes soft. "Besides, if God can still work with someone like me with all my fears and mistakes, who am I to say he can't work with someone like him?" 2.5 years passed. With good behavior, deep cooperation, and countless hours helping inside the prison, Brandon was allowed an early release under strict supervision. He walked out of the gate one cool morning with a small bag of clothes, a thin folder of documents, and a heart that felt both nervous and hopeful. There were no reporters this time, no big cameras, just one car waiting by the sidewalk. Dylan stood leaning against it, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual, but his eyes were shining. "Need a ride?" Dylan said. Brandon laughed softly. "Depends," he replied. "Do you charge extra for former bosses?" "Only in bad coffee," Dylan joked. "Get in." As they drove, the city felt different to Brandon, not because the buildings had changed, but because he had. The glass towers no longer looked like trophies. They looked like tools, things made by people, meant to serve people, not rule them. "Restart project is still running?" he asked. "Better than ever," Dylan said. "We got grants, volunteers, people heard about what happened and wanted to help, not just with money but with time and skills. We even work with schools now, teach kids about online safety and money in simple ways. You'd like it." Brandon smiled. "I liked it before," he said, "even if I didn't know how much I needed it." They pulled up in front of the building. The old shiny logo was gone. The new sign with the 3 words stood proudly over the entrance. People went in and out, carrying folders, chatting, laughing, some with worried faces that softened as soon as they stepped inside. Brandon's throat tightened. "I don't know if I should go in yet," he said quietly. "I don't want to make it about me." "Too late," a new voice said from the sidewalk. "It was never about you." He turned and saw Linda walking toward him, holding a small bag of food, her navy cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. Her face had more lines now, but her eyes were brighter than ever. "Welcome back," she said, smiling gently. He swallowed hard. "Thank you," he managed, "for everything, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to." She shook her head. "I didn't keep you alive," she said. "God did. I just walked into a room and said what I saw. You were the one who chose what to do with it." He looked at the building, then back at her. "I don't want to take over," he said quickly. "I don't want any titles. I just want to help. If you all will let me, I can teach, answer questions, sweep the floors if that's what's needed." Linda laughed, a warm sound. "We already have sweepers," she said, lifting her chin playfully. "But we do need someone to help with a new program. We're starting classes for adults who got tricked by fake investments online. They don't trust anyone in a suit anymore, but maybe hearing from someone who fell and got back up could give them hope." He nodded slowly. "I can do that," he said. "I can tell them how easy it is to lose yourself chasing numbers and how hard but possible it is to find yourself again." As they walked toward the entrance, Brandon noticed something near the door that he hadn't seen before, a small engraved plaque fixed into the wall. He leaned closer to read it. It said, "In honor of all the unseen workers whose courage and honesty can change the world, this place is dedicated to you." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Inspired by the courage of one cleaning lady who refused to stay silent." Brandon felt his eyes fill with tears. He turned to Linda. "You didn't tell me about this," he said softly. She shrugged, wiping a corner of her eye. "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about every person who thinks their voice doesn't matter because their clothes aren't expensive or their job title isn't fancy. We wanted them to know they're wrong." He smiled, a deep, full smile. "I was wrong about a lot of things," he said, "but I'm glad I was wrong about you." She patted his arm gently. "Come on," she said. "We've got people waiting inside who need to hear that money isn't everything, and who better to tell them than the man who found out the hard way." Months later, if you walked into the Restart Project building on a normal day, you might not even notice Brandon at first. You might see a tall man in a plain shirt and simple shoes, sitting at a round table with a group of people, drawing simple diagrams on a whiteboard showing how to spot scams, how to ask questions, how to say no when something felt wrong. You might see him helping an older man set up a safe online account. You might hear him telling a young woman, "Your worth is not the number in your bank. It's in your heart, your mind, your kindness. Never forget that." You would see Linda moving through the room with a smile, checking on the coffee pot, sitting down with someone who looked ready to cry, listening to them with real care. When she walked past Brandon's table, sometimes she would stop, put a hand on his shoulder and say, "Don't rush. They need time to understand. Slow is okay now." He would nod, remembering the days when he hated that word. Now it felt like a gift. In the evenings, when the building grew quiet again and the last visitors left, Brandon would stand at the window, just like he used to in his glass tower. But now, instead of looking down at the city and thinking about how to own more of it, he looked at the streets and thought about how to serve more of it. He had lost everything the world told him mattered: his money, his company, his status. But in losing it, he had found something stronger and deeper: humility, purpose, friendship, honesty, and love. He had found a life where he could look at himself in the mirror and not feel like a stranger. And all of that started in one single, shaky moment when a cleaning lady dropped her fear, walked into a room where nobody thought she belonged, and dared to speak the truth. Sometimes the biggest miracles in life don't come from the richest pockets or the loudest voices. Sometimes they come from quiet people in gray uniforms holding mop buckets and broken hearts who choose to open their mouths when it counts. The billionaire lost everything, but in losing it, he discovered that the greatest treasure was not in his bank account. It was in the people he had ignored, the lessons he had refused to learn, and the second chance he almost signed away. He didn't miss his glass tower anymore. He had something better now, a life built on truth, and that, he knew deep in his heart, could never be hacked, stolen, or erased. Hi friends, if you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you so much for staying with us. We hope it touched your heart and reminded you that nobody is too big to fall and nobody is too small to matter. Before you go, please like this video, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to this channel to support our growth so we can keep bringing you more deep, emotional, life-changing stories.